I was humiliated in front of everyone. The HOA dragged me to court over a garden hose, but when the judge unrolled the lot plan, their arrogance collapsed. And that wasn't even the worst part. I thought it was just another Monday morning in July until I saw the paper taped to my front door. It fluttered slightly in the desert breeze, the tape pulling at the edges. My porch was already warm, even though the sun had barely cleared the rooftops. I had been settled in my chair, a sweating glass of iced coffee on the table beside me, the radio tuned to an oldies station that spun out Elvis like it was 1962 again. For a moment, the world felt familiar steady until that paper pulled my eyes away from the horizon. I stood and reached for it, my fingers brushing against the doorframe. The garden hose lay coiled neatly by the steps, green rubber shining faintly under the hard Arizona sun. I'd left it there last night after watering the patch of grass that still fought to stay alive despite the heat wave. It seemed innocent tidy, even the kind of thing a neighbor might nod at and think he takes care of his place. Yet, as I held the folded paper in my hand, I already had a feeling that hose was at the heart of whatever message had been taped to my door. I unfolded it, my eyes catching on the HOA letterhead stamped at the top. My lips moved before I even realized it, reading aloud into the empty, morning notice of violation, unauthorized hose storage visible from the street. I stopped staring down the steps, where the hose rested, coiled like a sleeping cat. Heat pressed against the back of my neck. My first thought was disbelief, then something closer to irritation began to rise. Out of all the troubles in the world, they had chosen to fix their eyes on a hose. Across the street, Martha was bent over her roses, wide-brim hat shielding her from the sun. She glanced up, catching sight of me with the letter in my hand. Her watering can tilted, spilling a little stream into the dirt as she lingered a beat too long. Then she turned back quickly as though the flowers suddenly required her full devotion. I could almost feel curtains shifting along the block. Neighbors perched on porch swings or behind windows, not openly staring, but aware. That's how it always was around here. Quiet, observation, murmured talk later when the mail was collected or trash bins rolled back from the curb. I carried the letter inside the door, clicking shut behind me. The kitchen smelled faintly of toast from yesterday. I set the paper flat on the table, smoothing it down as though that might erase the words. My chair scraped the linoleum as I sat staring past the curtains at the hose glinting under the morning sun. Unauthorized, I muttered. The words stuck in my mouth like a piece of dry bread. Unauthorized hose storage. Visible from the street. The radio played on in the background, Patsy Cline. This time, her voice slow and aching. I rubbed at my temple, the rhythm of the music stretching against my thoughts. I had served in committees before, lived through stricter times, but never had I seen such fuss over something so small, so harmless. The house creaked as it warmed. The ice melted in my glass, sending drops sliding down its sides. I leaned back, letter still visible on the table. My eyes wandered once more to the yard. That simple coil of hose lying where I'd left it had somehow been transformed into evidence of wrongdoing. All this over a hose, I whispered the words, carrying more weight than I expected. I picked the letter up again, skimming the final lines, though I already knew what they said. And there it was, stark in bold print at the bottom: failure to comply may result in legal lien or further action. By Thursday, she came marching down the sidewalk with that clipboard tucked like a weapon under her arm. The Arizona sun was merciless, but Karen seemed untouched by it, her sunglasses flashing as she strode past the porches. The cicadas hummed steady as a metronome, filling the pauses between her heels, clicking against the pavement. I had been sitting on my own porch again, glass of lemonade sweating in my hand, trying to ignore the heat and the low buzz of neighborhood whispers. But I could see her from a block away, and my stomach sank. The hose lay exactly where it had, before coiled neatly at the edge of my steps, as innocent as a child's jump rope. I caught myself glancing at it as though by staring hard enough I could make it invisible. The letter from Monday was folded in my pocket heavy, even though it was just a thin sheet of paper. Karen stopped at my walkway like a general approaching contested ground. She lifted the clipboard, flipped a page, and jotted something down with a flourish. The pen's scratching was sharp enough that I imagined I could hear it even over the cicadas. "Good afternoon," I said, keeping my tone even. She tilted her head, lips pressed into a thin smile. "Mr. Harold, we need to address this ongoing violation." She gestured with her pen toward the hose. HOA bylaws are very clear about storage of unsightly items. I swallowed back the irritation that rose up. It's a hose, Karen. Coiled, not sprawled. I use it to keep the grass alive. Her sunglasses hid her eyes, but I could feel the judgment. She scribbled another note. Rules are rules. Failure to comply escalates fines. We've been through this with others in the community. From the corner of my eye, I saw Martha across the street. She was standing by her roses again, one hand shading her face, the other resting on her watering can. Her posture was casual, but her eyes tracked every move. A couple of other neighbors leaned forward on their porch swings, wood creaking as they pretended not to listen. The faint clink of ice in glasses carried across the street. I leaned on the porch rail. Karen, with all respect, this is getting ridiculous. There are flags still out from the 4th, faded and ragged, and no one says a word. But a hose. That's your priority. Her jaw tightened. She wrote another line on the clipboard. You don't want to test me on this. Compliance isn't optional. I felt the weight of the stares, the quiet amusement of some, the nervous shuffling of others. Nobody spoke, but the tension floated across the street like heat rising from the asphalt. Karen tucked the pen back behind the metal clip and leaned slightly closer. Her voice dropped sharp as a thorn. I ran the Johnsons out, and I can do the same with you. For a moment, the cicadas filled the silence again. My mouth was dry, but I held her gaze. She turned crisply and marched off to the next house, clipboard under her arm, leaving a trail of unease behind her. Later, as the sun tilted west and the street quieted, Martha crossed the lawn toward me. Her sandals pressed soft prints in the grass, and she kept her voice low. She's serious, Harold, Martha whispered, glancing down the street where Karen had disappeared. She'll drag you all the way to court if she has to. When the mail truck pulled away that Saturday, I knew bad news had come, my name stamped in red ink. The tires crackled on the pavement as the carrier waved half-heartedly in the heat, and I waved back without much thought. The flag on my mailbox sagged down, signaling delivery. The afternoon sun was merciless, bleaching the driveway, shimmering off the asphalt like a mirage. My shirt clung to my back as I walked toward the box, the weight of the week pressing harder with every step. Inside, among the grocery circulars and a church newsletter, sat the envelope stiff official certified. My name was stamped across it in a garish, alarming red. For a moment, I just stared, Martha's warning echoing in my head. She'll drag you all the way to court if she has to. I carried it back inside, setting my glass of iced tea beside me on the kitchen counter. The cubes rattled faintly, a sound too cheerful for what I was about to read. I slid a finger under the flap and tore it open. The letter inside was formal, bristling with legal phrasing. Notice of hearing for eviction recommendation. It read bold as a headline. My eyes skimmed down, catching on the absurdity of it, unauthorized garden equipment. My garden hose, neatly coiled, now dressed up in bureaucratic language, was the cause of this looming storm. I sat heavily at the kitchen table, the letter spread in front of me. My mind tumbled back through years of paying HOA dues without complaint, helping set up chairs for neighborhood barbecues, even lending out tools when folks needed them. Was that worth nothing? To them, it seemed my only identity now was violator. The television hummed faintly from the living room, some local anchor recounting the week's news. Their voice felt distant, muffled, like it came from another world. I pressed my palms flat on the table and read the letter again, slower this time, each phrase stabbing deeper. Failure to appear may result in lien placement and recommendation of eviction, I muttered under my breath. Bitterness thick. They want me gone. Over a hose. The phone sat on the counter and I reached for it almost without thinking. Martha picked up on the second ring, her tone cautious as though she already knew why I was calling. They've set a hearing, I said. My voice cracked in places I hadn't expected. Eviction, she asked, sharper now. I read her the header, every word tasting like ash. She let out a long sigh. Harold, you can't let this roll over you. Come to the Rotary meeting Tuesday. There's someone there you need to talk to. Martha. I'm not sure. She cut me off firm. Don't miss it. I set the phone down and stared again at the paper-red ink glaring back at me. The room seemed smaller, the walls pressing in. The glass of tea had gone watery ice melted, but I didn't drink. All I could hear was Martha's voice, steady as the tick of a clock. There's someone at Rotary who can help. Don't miss it. I hadn't set foot in the Rotary Club hall in years, but that Tuesday it felt like walking into a lifeline. The parking lot shimmered in the early August heat, and the church bell across the lawn had just finished its half-hour chime. I patted the inside pocket of my shirt, felt the stiff corners of the red envelope there, and pushed through the glass doors into the hall. The same bulletin board greeted me, cork-pocked with thumbtacks crowded with flyers, the church bazaar, a blood drive, a bake sale, a photo of the last year's Thanksgiving potluck with half the town squeezed into the frame. The smell of coffee and floor wax and something cinnamon sweet hit me in a wave of memory. Martha waved me over from a folding table near the back. "They saved you a seat," she said, her voice low and conspiratorial like she was handing me a map out of a maze. The coffee urn burbled behind her, steam curling in lazy ribbons. A woman I half remembered from the diner made the rounds with a tray of pie blueberry by the look and smell of it, sliding slices onto paper plates with the same ease as a Sunday school teacher passing hymnals. At the next table, 3 men in caps traded stories. One wore a Korean War patch, another had a weathered Yankees logo, the third a hat so sun-bleached the original emblem was a guess. Their voices overlapped in gentle argument about whether the new stop sign on Olive Street had helped traffic or just confused folks. Martha touched my elbow. "Caldwell's here," she murmured. "He said he could spare a few minutes." I turned and saw him neatly pressed short-sleeve shirt tie knotted just so, a posture that said retired in body but not in mind. A widower I'd heard, and a lawyer before that. He stood with easy patience beside a brochure rack, browsing the announcements like a man who didn't need to hurry anymore. When he noticed us, he offered a small, steady smile. "Harold," he said, as if we'd met last week instead of decades apart at a town parade. "Martha tells me you've had a brush with our friends at the HOA." "More than a brush," I said, hand instinctively pressing my pocket. I took out the envelope and the hearing notice, spreading them on the table as we sat. The paper lay there between the coffee rings and the blueberry stains, all that formal language suddenly smaller in the middle of ordinary life. Caldwell read silently, lips moving a fraction, eyes narrowing not in suspicion, but in care. He didn't rush. Outside, a gust of heat rattled the glass. Inside, the room hummed with slow conversation and the soft squeak of metal chairs on linoleum. He finally looked up. "First things first," he said. "They don't evict you. They recommend. Then they try to make it sound inevitable." He tapped one sentence with a blunt forefinger. "See, recommendation. It's not nothing, but it's not a sheriff at your door." I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "Feels like the same thing from where I'm sitting." "I know," he said. "They count on that feeling." He took a sip of coffee and made a face at the strength, then smiled and took another anyway. "Tell me exactly what they cite." "Unauthorized garden equipment," I said, unable to keep the bite out of my voice. "My hose, coiled by the steps." He nodded. "Aesthetics provisions. The slipperiest part of any set of bylaws. Broad language, lots of room for interpretation and frankly for bullying." His gaze softened. "I've seen this before." "You have?" Martha asked, leaning closer. He hesitated, then shrugged a little. "Back when my Helen was still alive, our old neighborhood tried something similar. Not with a hose. Holiday lights. I won't bore you with the whole saga." He smiled in a way that held both pride and an ache that hadn't faded. "We learned that paper can be a shield and a mirror, if it's the right paper." I glanced at the notice, then at him. "What kind of paper do I need?" "The kind that trumps interpretation with fact," he said. "Your deed. The easements. The original lot plan filed with the county. If that hose rests on, say, a utility easement or any area outside HOA aesthetic control, their language collapses." I blinked. The red envelope felt heavier. "I've got my deed at home, but the plan do I even have that maybe?" "Maybe not." Caldwell reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a small notebook, the kind with a spiral that always snags on your pocket if you're not careful. He wrote down a phone number and a name. "County records. Ask for Miranda in the record room. Tell her Caldwell said hello. She'll know where to look and what copy you need. Make sure it's stamped and certified. A lot plan." I repeated, tasting the words. "That tells them where their rules stop and where yours begin," he said gently. "Boundaries aren't just fence lines. They're obligations. If the plan shows an easement, HOA bylaws can't trespass there, not even with a clipboard." His mouth quirked. "Especially not with a clipboard." Martha laughed softly, relief edging into her breath. The diner lady passed again and set a slice of pie near us without asking, then topped off our coffees with the practiced grace of someone who measures care in small refills. Around us, conversations rose and fell like familiar hymns. "What else should I do?" I asked. "Beyond the plan, document." "The ordinary," he said. "Dates, times, photos of the hose, neat and coiled as you've said. Keep all letters. Don't threaten, don't make speeches. Show up prepared. Judges respond to calm facts more than heated adjectives." He flicked his eyes to the notice again. "And don't miss the hearing, even if we get the plan first." I nodded, feeling the coil of fear loosen just enough to breathe around it. "Miranda, in records," I said, writing her name on a napkin with a pen Martha produced from her purse. "Stamped and certified. A trio of older fellows shuffled by, one clapping me on the shoulder. They'd heard, of course they had. Not the details, but enough to offer quiet solidarity. It felt like the way men in our father's time would nod at each other at the hardware store, meaning, "I see you," without making a fuss. Caldwell's gaze went kind for a moment. "You're not alone in this," he said. "They make folks feel that way, but you aren't." Martha squeezed my forearm. "We'll drive to the county if you want. I can bring a cooler with lemon water. That building is always too warm." I smiled, something like gratitude and embarrassment tangling in my chest. The room felt like a quilt stitched from all the years I'd lived in this town, pie and church bells and flyers about rummage sales and men in caps teasing each other over nothing much. Caldwell slid the notice back across the table to me. "Call Miranda today if you can. Sometimes the older plats live in a drawer that nobody opens unless asked twice. And if there isn't an easement, I asked because the practical part of me refused to let hope run ahead of evidence. Then we argue scope and reasonableness," he said evenly. "Maintenance necessity, selective enforcement." He lifted his chin toward Martha. "You said the Johnsons?" She nodded, mouth tight. "Christmas lights." They pushed and pushed. "Then there may be a pattern," he said. "But first things first, the plan." I folded the notice and tucked it back into the envelope, then slid both into my pocket where I could feel their outline against my heartbeat. Caldwell tore the page with the phone number from his notebook and handed it to me, his handwriting small and tidy. "You can do this," he said. "It's mostly patience and paper." We stood. The hall was emptying, folks drifting toward the doors in twos and threes, laughter, and the scrape of chairs blending into the summer light. The church bell began again, small and bright, and for just a second I pictured my hose on the steps, green and harmless, and felt the absurdity of what it had become, a symbol more than a thing. At the doorway, Caldwell paused. One last thing he said. "If anyone from the HOA comes around again, be courteous. Say as little as you can, and keep your phone nearby. A photograph taken at the right time can save you a paragraph later." "Thank you," I said, my throat thick. "For the time, for the map," he chuckled. "For the map, yes." Martha walked me toward the exit, the cool of the lobby giving way to the baked brightness outside. She touched my shoulder. "You're not alone," she repeated. "Remember that." I took the napkin with Miranda's name on it and tucked it into my wallet as if paper could anchor the future, the red envelope pressed against my ribs like a reminder and a dare. "Caldwell, without that lot plan, you'll lose. But with it, you may just silence them." Harold leaves hall clutching napkin notes, suddenly hopeful, yet fearful. My dining table looked more like a lawyer's office than a retiree's kitchen that Monday morning. Papers sprawled across the surface, some stacked, others fanned out like a messy deck of cards. The red envelope from weeks back sat right on top of the pile as if glaring at me for letting it exist in the first place. A small fan whirred in the corner, stirring warm air, rustling the edges of receipts, notes, and the napkin where Caldwell had written Miranda's name. On the refrigerator, a flyer for the upcoming community potluck fluttered each time the fan swung my way Tuesday evening, "Bring a dish to share." The cheerful block letters mocked the tension in my house. I had the phone cradled against my shoulder, pen in hand. Caldwell's steady voice guided me step by step. "Yes, Harold, you want the certified copy," he said. "Stamped with the county seal. Don't settle for anything less. Ask about the plat maps too, not just the deed. They show boundaries better than any description." I jotted notes in a spiral pad, pressing hard as though ink could anchor my nerves. "Certified, stamped. Got it. What if they say they can't find it? Then insist," he replied. "Those records don't vanish. They get misfiled. There's a difference." The line crackled faintly. Long distance in tone, even though he lived just across town. His patience steadied me, a contrast to the storm I felt every time Karen's name surfaced. After we hung up, I dialed the county clerk's office. A woman with a brisk but polite voice answered. "Records, this is Miranda." The name sent a jolt of recognition. "Yes, Miranda. Caldwell told me to call. I need a certified copy of my property's lot plan." There was a pause, papers shuffling in the background. "All right, sir. Give me your address. I'll check the index." I recited it slowly as though each number was a prayer. "We may need a day or two," she said. "Some of these plats are old microfilm scans." "That's fine," I told her, "as long as it's official." She promised to call when it was ready. I hung up and stared at the papers again, feeling like a man who'd just planted a flag on a tiny hill. A knock at the back door broke my trance. Martha stepped in, carrying a foil-covered pie plate, the smell of peaches preceding her. "Figured you could use something sweet," she said, setting it down amid the paperwork. The sight of its sugary glaze, shining crust golden, reminded me there were still sane, good things in the world. I poured 2 glasses of iced tea cubes, clinking like little bells, and we sat together at the cluttered table. "You've got quite the setup here," she remarked, eyeing the folders. "I feel like a clerk in training," I admitted. "Miranda's looking for my lot plan." Martha nodded approvingly. "Good. Caldwell always says the paper trail matters more than the noise." We shared slices of pie that taste as comforting as childhood summers. For a brief moment I forgot the weight of it all. But then I remembered the mail. I went to the box, still warm from the afternoon sun, and flipped through the stack. Bills, an advertisement for a lawn service, and the HOA newsletter. The heading, in bold, Community Compliance Update. I carried it back inside, dreading as much as knowing. Martha watched my face pale as I unfolded the sheet. Halfway down the page, there it was my name. Non-compliant homeowner repeated violation subject may face removal. The words seemed to shout off the paper louder than the cicadas buzzing outside. My throat tightened. I read it aloud, my voice shaking despite myself. Subject may face removal. Martha's eyes narrowed, her fork frozen mid-air. They printed that. "They did?" I said, slamming the newsletter down on top of the red envelope, like some wanted poster. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The kitchen felt too small, the fan too loud, the cheerful potluck flyer too bright against the fridge. Finally, Martha leaned in, her voice low and fierce. "Karen's not just after you, Harold. She wants everyone scared." By mid-August, I found myself sitting on a cold metal chair in the town hall basement facing a line of stony HOA board members. The room smelled of burnt coffee and old paper, a scent that seemed to seep out of the bulletin boards lining the walls, flyers for a VFW dance, a blood drive, and a poster announcing the county fair. Folding chairs scraped against the concrete floor as neighbors shifted, settling into uneasy silence. I clutched my folder tight against my chest, its thin weight betraying the absence of what I truly needed, the certified lot plan that hadn't yet arrived. The edges of the paper inside bent under my grip, and I prayed they might somehow carry the force of law without the seal that mattered most. Karen stood at the front of the room like a conductor ready to summon her orchestra. Sunglasses perched on her head like a crown, her clipboard rested in her arm as though it were a scepter. She spoke with the cadence of authority, each phrase carefully rehearsed. "This homeowner has failed to comply with regulations regarding unauthorized garden equipment visible from the street." She lifted a sheet clipped beneath the board. "Multiple notices have been issued. No corrective action taken." Her voice carried in the hollow room. Murmurs rippled through the crowd of neighbors. Some looked down at their hands, unwilling to meet my eyes. Others watched Karen with something like admiration, or perhaps fear. When it was my turn, I rose slowly, knees stiff from both age and nerves. I opened my folder, pulled out the letters I'd kept, laid them on the folding table before the board. My voice wavered, but steadied with each word. "I've lived here over 20 years. I've paid my dues faithfully. This hose, coiled neatly by my steps, is being treated like a crime. There's no harm, no hazard. I've requested the original lot plan, which will show I stopped swallowing. It hasn't arrived yet, but it will." A man on the board adjusted his glasses, glancing quickly at Karen. She tapped her clipboard once sharply as though cutting off my plea. "Promises don't change facts," she said. "We have regulations." He has not complied. The board members exchanged low whispers. I could feel Martha's gaze from the back row, steady and supportive, but even that couldn't penetrate the wall of resignation building around me. I knew the outcome before they cast their votes. One by one, hands rose. A majority. Karen tallied with the pointed end of her pen, each checkmark like a nail hammered in place. Finally, she looked up, eyes gleaming. "The board finds this homeowner non-compliant." The words echoed in my chest, heavier than any gavel. Neighbors shifted uncomfortably, some coughing, others staring at the floor as though they hadn't just participated in my public shaming by silence. I gathered my thin folder papers, rattling with the tremor in my hands, and forced myself to sit until the meeting adjourned. When the crowd dispersed, I walked out into the warm night air. The town hall steps creaked under my weight. My humiliation clung like the August humidity. Martha appeared beside me, slipping something discreetly into my hand, a plain envelope warm from her grip. County clerk called. She whispered urgency in her tone. "Your lot, plans ready. Judge Whitaker expects you Friday." I'd never thought a rolled-up sheet of county paper could carry more weight than Karen's entire clipboard. The courthouse doors were heavy oak, polished by decades of hands. As I pushed them open, the scent of waxed floors and old wood met me a seriousness that made my palms sweat. Sunlight filtered through high windows, catching on the American flag that stood tall at the front. The marble floor echoed each step I took, and for a fleeting moment I felt like an imposter walking into history. Caldwell walked beside me, calm as ever, his leather folder tucked under his arm. "All rise," the bailiff called as Judge Whitaker entered. We stood the scrape of wooden benches filling the chamber. The judge, silver-haired and stern, adjusted his glasses and sat, setting the tone for what was to come. Karen was already at the opposite table, her clipboard bristling with paper's edges marked with sticky notes. She glanced at me briefly, lips pressed tight, then turned back to the board members who had accompanied her. The sight of her so sure, so poised, sent a flicker of doubt through me. My hands trembled slightly as I clutched the tube carrying the lot plan. Karen began, first her voice sharp and commanding. She recited bylaws as though they were scripture, her pen tapping each section. "This homeowner has repeatedly violated Article 4, Section B, unauthorized garden equipment visible from the street. Non-compliance after notice. Escalating penalties ignored." Her words fell like stones piling higher. She gestured toward the stack of notices, each page clipped and highlighted. "We have the right to enforce community standards. Without order, there is chaos." The judge listened occasionally, jotting notes. His expression gave nothing away. When it was my turn, Caldwell nudged me forward. My throat felt dry, but I pulled the deed and the newly delivered county lot plan from my folder. The large sheet unrolled across the table, its lines neat and precise boundaries clear as truth. "This," I began, voice steadier than I felt, "is the official county lot plan. Certified and stamped. My hose sits well within my property line. No bylaw grants removal of a homeowner for storing lawful equipment." I glanced at Caldwell. He leaned forward, adjusting his glasses, his voice firm but calm. "Your Honor, HOA powers are limited to contractual enforcement within the scope of their bylaws. They may fine, they may notify. They cannot fabricate authority to evict. The lot plan demonstrates no encroachment, no hazard." Karen's pen tapped faster. She tried to interject, waving a copy of the bylaws. "Section 4 clearly grants," Judge Whitaker raised a hand. "Enough." He leaned back, studying the document, silence stretching long. The room seemed to hold its breath. Neighbors sat in the gallery, veterans' caps and sun hats tilted forward, eyes wide. I could almost hear Martha's whispered prayers behind me. Finally, the judge spoke, his voice carrying the weight of law and finality. "The court finds the HOA has overstepped its authority. This case is dismissed. Further sanctions against the HOA may apply." The gavel slammed, the crack of wood echoing like thunder. Gasps rippled through the room, neighbors shifting, whispers darting from row to row. Relief washed through me so suddenly my knees nearly buckled. Caldwell clasped my shoulder, steadying me. Across the aisle, Karen had gone pale. Her fingers trembled as she fumbled with her papers, the mighty clipboard suddenly no shield at all. She turned toward the gallery, eyes darting, but found no sympathy waiting. The whispers grew louder, threads of disbelief and justice twining together. By the time August faded into September, our cul-de-sac felt lighter, as if the desert air itself had unclenched. The long heat of summer still lingered, but there was a softness to it now, as if even the sun had grown tired of scowling. Lawns, though patchy, were dotted with folding chairs, coolers, and mismatched picnic tables dragged to the center of the street for the end-of-summer potluck. The smell of barbecue mingled with peach cobbler beans and someone's deviled eggs. Patriotic bunting left over from July still hung from a porch railing, faded but cheerful, fluttering in the warm breeze. I carried a pitcher of iced tea to the table, condensation running down my wrist. Martha set her cobbler beside the potato salad, giving me a look that needed no words. We had weathered something larger than any one of us. Caldwell sat off to the side, his cap tilted back, laughter lines deepened as he accepted a paper plate loaded by an eager neighbor. "For a retired lawyer," he said with a wink that was one last case worth dusting off the books. His grin disarmed everyone, and the tension that had gripped the street for weeks seemed to slip away like a forgotten draft. Children darted across the grass, their shrieks of delight carrying over the hum of conversation. A sprinkler spun lazily at the edge of one lawn, its arcs catching the late light. I uncoiled my hose, set it down on the patch of grass by my steps. The hiss and spray leaped into the air, and soon the children ran through it, laughter echoing against the houses. Neighbors who had once looked away from me now came forward, shaking hands, clapping my back. One elderly man in a veteran's cap told me quietly, "Took guts standing up like that. Reminded us all we're more than rules and fines." His words settled deep, not as praise, but as truth. Martha leaned against the porch rail beside me, a paper plate balanced in her hand. "You did it, Harold. You stood firm. I didn't do it alone," I said, glancing toward Caldwell, toward Martha and the neighbors gathered around tables heavy with food. The sight filled me with a warmth that no summer sun could touch. At the far end of the cul-de-sac, Karen's house sat in silence. A stark for sale sign staked in the front yard told its own story. Curtains drawn, no clipboard in sight. The absence was louder than her presence had ever been. I looked back at the children leaping through the spray, the hose gleaming in the late sun. The loop had closed the grievance that began with this coil of rubber ending with laughter instead of anger. I muttered under my breath, half amused, half weary. All that over this hose. As the summer shadows grew long, the neighborhood found its peace again with laughter and small talk drifting easily across porches. What had begun as a petty feud turned into a lesson about how fragile fairness can be when authority is misused. Yet it also showed that when ordinary people stand side by side, the weight of justice becomes unshakable. Like a lantern glowing steady at dusk, the memory of one stand against bullying power will guide this street for years to come.